This is the Writers Podcast, a Writers After Dark radio production, bringing you the best in writing advice, news, trends, and interviews. Hosted by award-winning authors S.K. Anthony and Raymond Esposito.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Writers Podcast. I'm S.K. Anthony and I'm here with Raymond Esposito. Hola.
How are you?
Sometimes I get very hyper.
Hey, long before you collect reviews or distribute advanced reader copies or even finalize your proofread edits, there's a solid opportunity to receive objective input on your novel. Beta reading, as it's called, can be a great method to find both the positives and the negatives in your story.
If you've been writing for a while, or even if you're just starting now, no doubt you figured out that there's no one secret to producing a good book. It takes a lot of hard work, patience, and determination.
And in our case, many rounds of coffee and or alcohol, vodka, if you have it, please.
Cheers to that. But the more I write books, the more I've learned to appreciate the value of a good beta reader. I think they are part of the most important stage of any book.
Which is why we're dedicating this episode to beta readers and discussing the importance of having them.
You might have come across the term beta reader while researching writing advice, or maybe this is the first time you've heard of it. But what is a beta reader?
Basically, a beta reader is a person who provides you with feedback on your manuscript, with enough time, of course, to make adjustments before you send it out into the universe. They're really just a test reader.
They work much in the same way as developmental or content editors from publishing houses, but not as official.
Maybe official, you mean not as expensive.
Yes, exactly. But maybe the best way to differentiate them is thinking of a developmental editor as a writing coach who you pay, as you just said, versus a beta reader who offers insight as a reader and is sometimes free.
Though, of course, they both offer feedback. A developmental editor is really good at all the small details, and a beta reader, they spend more time on the big picture. And if you're lucky, you're going to find a beta reader who's actually really good at both.
So why are they important? Tell me, Raymond.
Well, much like a software company releases a beta or tests versions of their program so they can get feedback and then work out the kinks and bugs, writers need the same thing, and that is in the form of a beta reader.
Exactly. So soliciting feedback from beta readers is your chance to address the weak spots of your manuscripts before you publish. And no matter how good a writer you are or how long you've been writing, you can still benefit from using them.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're self-publishing or trying to go with the traditional route. Beta readers have existed for centuries. If you think about that spouse or friend who read the first writer's manuscript, or the person who was the beta reader who read hieroglyphics or cave drawings.
The reality is that even if you've been through your manuscript with a fine-tooth comb 100 times, you're going to miss things.
Whatever the case, a beta reader can provide an excellent new look at your work, commenting on problem areas or even things that you're trying to ignore. Sometimes we kind of lie to ourselves about, maybe that is good enough and I can just leave it.
I've been there. I have totally so been there where I've lied to myself. But that's why they're important, right? They'll also give you insight on plot holes, character development, sometimes grammar mistakes, sentence structures, and the overall structure of the story. Much like you'd get if you were part of a critique group or, from a critique partner.
Yeah, so speaking of, is there a real difference between a beta reader and a critique partner?
Well, yes and no. Unlike a critique partner, a beta reader does not need to be a writer.
What?
No, they don't. They can just be prolific readers who give feedback on their subjective impressions. That being said, a beta reader can be a writer as well.
So you'd get the same kind of detailed feedback that you'd get from a critique partner with the beta reader, but that beta reader is one-sided. They beta read for you, but you don't necessarily read their stuff in exchange. And they aren't necessarily a writer. So there may be nothing to read.
Exactly. But if it goes both ways and you swap betas, then it's probably fair to call that person a critique partner. You're both writers who trade chapters or whole stories and offer valuable feedback to each other. You and I are a little different with this. You're okay with sending chapters as they go, and I freak out. I need the full manuscript before I can send it because I just don't know what I'm going to change.
Yeah, it has different styles. But to kind of wrap up that point, a critique partner has to be a writer, but your beta reader can be either a writer or a very prolific reader.
Yep, and and to be more specific, beta readers they're gonna catch loose ends and pay close attention to plot, characterization, prose, voice, double check facts, and even pacing. But even professional long-term authors need help with these. We can get caught up in the main plot and drop the B or C storylines.
Yeah, like, hey, what happened to the sick roommate in the story who went to the surgery? A lot of times authors will put something in and they sort of forget, so they send their character or sub-character to the OR and then they forget all about them. The reader usually, however, has not forgotten.
Exactly. Beta readers will point that out, as well as things that authors become blind to, like overuse of dialogue tags or confusion on which character is talking when. Or if you have repeated words, repeated phrases, or any other words you may have confused, they're going to point that out. Personally, I know that I'm a just queen. I just did this, but this is just why.
So I've got mine, and that is my characters are always realizing something. They always realized in the first draft. And if you know the words and phrases you tend to overuse, your beta can, help you keep an eye out for those things. And when you do my beta reads, I always say, hey, just, keep track of how many times a character suddenly realized something, please.
I know you've gotten very good at them since you've studied that whole macro, how to edit through macros, and you even did a YouTube tutorial video for our readers.
The macro thing is a real lifesaver.
It really is. But if you don't have macro, beta readers can help you with that.
Really macro.
Yes, exactly. But they can also warn you, of other things, like if your character lacks proper arc development or if your character is unlikable.
If they're supposed to be likable.
Exactly. Which, to me is crucial. As I've told you many times, I love character-driven stories. And if your character's motivation aren't clear or they come off douchebaggy, our beta reader is going to point this out for you. So, you get a chance to work on his background and warm him up to the reader. Every decision he makes will make sense and will keep us cheering him on.
Seems like a lot of work. Beta readers can offer specific suggestions about the main goals of the story and let you know if the flow and structure has problems. Continuity and pace, those are some of the biggest issues for a writer.
Yeah, personally, I found that I've contradicted myself from one page to the next. That was not cool, but luckily that's why there's revisions. And another example that I found a while back, and it stayed with me. There's a character who just left work. But, she decides to go on a last-minute date that eventually ends in the bedroom. Then suddenly, her beautiful, long, shiny gown is falling to the floor. I'm sorry, she had that on at work? When did she even have time to change?
What is this, ABC? We're cutting all the nudity and good parts?
Well, come on, but these details are important.
A beta reader also can brainstorm with you and offer, creative input. Sometimes they come up with new ideas that really add a punch to the story that you didn't know was missing, or they really help you. I always return to pace, and they can really help with these creative ideas. For example, when I was writing The Devil's Hour, you were doing the beta read for that, not my critique partner because I don't read your stuff. And there was a scene towards the end that involved a clubhouse, and I hadn't mentioned it before, so of course I had to get into this description of where it was in the neighborhood and all these other things. And you made that simple suggestion of, if you gave that description earlier in the book and then could just refer to it, you wouldn't interrupt the pace. And it was genius.
And I even, I went back and I made a note of where it would fit.
Yep.
Because you had it all set up. It was just, just needed to be moved up a little bit. Anyway, a beta reader also is going to alert you if there are any info dumps. If you have too many characters or if they're bored or confused from the storyline. Also, if there's, if the plot is believable or if you have too many twists and turns, which usually I suffer from. And even if you manage to annoy them, they're going to let you know that.
And most importantly, I think a beta reader can tell you what you're doing right. I say most important because, when you're locked in this whole writing process by yourself, It's very motivational to have someone tell you, hey, this is great, and then that just helps you continue writing.
Yeah, and since writers seriously suffer from imposter syndrome, as you and I have discussed in a previous episode, a little cheering up goes a long way.
Yeah, but keep in mind they're all different. So individual beta readers might focus on different aspects of your story, and each of them can provide different information, different pieces that they've noticed. So your job really is to combine all of these different types of feedback to work on the revisions of your book.
Which brings us to, really deciding who you want as a beta reader. We can tell you straight up who you don't want. And that's your spouse, your best friend, or your mom.
Oh my God, those are my 3 favorite beta readers.
But, they love you and they're predisposed to loving whatever you write. And that's great, but, it's not very helpful.
You probably need more than one beta reader, although I don't have more than one. Some authors like me, we just prefer to work with one to avoid confusion, or we find one we really like. But there is a benefit to having multiple beta readers across different stages of your manuscript.
Yeah, there's no set numbers, but 3 to 5 is a good start.
Oh, that seems like a lot of work.
No, it really is, but especially if you're bypassing a developmental editor, because it is an expensive service.
On that note, some beta readers also charge money. But, if money is a main concern, you should know that some price in ranges of $20 to $100, so it's not overly expensive. It's not like a full edit, and it can be well worth that money to get the feedback that you need to write a better book.
Exactly. And if you're wondering why you'd pay a beta reader when you can find a free one, well, because 1, it's not that easy to find beta readers. And 2, because sometimes time is of the essence, and a hired beta will most likely deliver, as per your requested deadline.
Yeah, I'm more in favor of just paying something for the service so you can, now you're a client, you can set up a timeline, you can set up the expectations. But, if you can't afford that, the free ones are an excellent way to go. You're just going to have to be more flexible with their timelines. But back to who you should target, choosing a beta who reads in your genre can be a great place to start. They'll have an instinct for what works and doesn't work in terms of the expectations of that genre's plot and structure.
Yeah, but I also like someone who reads something different. The one who reads your genre knows it well enough that they can make sure it's accurate to their knowledge and follows all the appropriate rules and expectations.
And the ones who are new to that genre, they can make sure that general readers understand your world and can offer insightful feedback for an outsider. What's great about that is if a person doesn't normally write or read in the genre, they'll be the perfect person to tell you what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. There won't be that danger of you just making assumptions that, well, everybody understands what I'm talking about.
Yeah, more eyes and more perspectives can point out different things that you as the author are too close to see objectively.
Yeah, let me tell you something. As authors, we are too close to see many things objectively. But, even things like if your character has a specific health issue, maybe they come from a minority background or a different background than yourself, or from a city that you've never actually visited, a beta reader who has that particular background or understanding can really be invaluable to adding input to your story.
Exactly. But either way, you want someone with passions for books. If they're writers themselves, they understand the challenges of writing a book. If not, at least they understand what makes a good book. And, they'll understand how beta works. Enough to know to ignore typos and trying to be as objective as possible.
Some authors also prefer beta readers who know more about the writing craft than they do. Getting feedback from someone who can act as a mentor because they're more skilled or more experienced, that can teach you a lot about writing.
But finding a good beta reader isn't easy, and bad ones can end up crushing you, or never even meeting the deadline. So please educate yourself about them before you commit.
Yeah, so, we've talked about having 3 or 4 beta readers, 3 to 5, but we're also talking about how difficult it is to find them. So the obvious question is, where do you find these beta readers?
But one way to find beta readers is to work your social media platforms. If you don't know where to start, Goodreads has a forum where people can look for beta readers of any genre and many other beta threads. But, be careful. Goodreads is also known as Troll Central.
It absolutely is Troll Central. You get lit up over there. There are other sites like Critique Circle, Wattpad, blogs, and even Twitter is great as a place to connect. And in all these places, you can find like-minded readers and writers who are willing to help. Just get to know them first so you can be sure that you can fully trust their feedback or that you're going to find their feedback valid for the things that you need.
Or you can even go to local writing seminars, workshops, or critique group if you rather have face-to-face feedback. But once you found your beta readers, remember that the critique should always happen before you copy edit your manuscript.
In one sense, the manuscript you send them should be as perfect as you can get it on your own. Obviously, don't send anybody a first draft. Nobody wants to read that. So you want to make it as easy as possible, because they're doing you a favor. But on the other hand, you don't want to send the beta after you've paid money to have your book professionally edited, and then you're going to go make changes that also need to be edited.
So what you want is a beta read between your second and your third drafts, and you want to watch the beta reader also what their preferred file is. You want to have it formatted for their preference. Some of them rather the Kindle version or even a PDF, but if you send them the Word documents, we advise that you create and save a document for each person so that there's no confusion when you're revising.
I prefer to write it all out on a few napkins and mail it to you. Will that work?
Yes, of course.
But you should also let them know what you're looking for. Let them know if there's a particular type of feedback that you'd like to get from them. Have a checklist of questions you'd like them to answer, or create a specific list around the content. Just let them know that, hey, these are the things I'm looking for, but please go ahead and ignore typos or grammatical errors that are going to be part of the edit.
Yeah, just give them that clear instructions about what feedback you need, and ask specifically if they can give you the whys for the changes to your suggestion. Like if they're saying, I don't like it or I'm confused, that's great. But it's not very helpful if you're trying to learn as you go, right? So you need the reasons. So this doesn't work because the character doesn't have enough motivation, something like that.
You have to, depending on the level of the beta reader, you did it professionally, so you understand how to do it, but you may have to guide your beta reader to get the best feedback. And that means, you may have to ask them, hey, can you keep notes in a separate document, or could you use track changes, or could you just use it in a comments section? So it's okay to say, this is how I prefer to get the feedback.
Here is a very important point. Please, please, please set a due date. If you want your manuscript back in 6 weeks, tell them you need it in 4 or 5, and play it safe. Life happens.
Hear that, folks?
So sadly,
if you beta read for SK and she tells you she needs it in whatever time, subtract a couple weeks off of that. She doesn't really need it.
No, don't you dare. But sadly, not all of them deliver on time. Like I said, life happens. The worst part is that a lot of them don't even deliver at all. The other thing is, you have to be sensitive.
Most beta readers are just as nervous as the writer is. And, critiquing someone else's book can be nerve-wracking. And no matter how many times they've done it, it's not the most comfortable thing to have to tell someone, this isn't as good as it could be.
Yeah, as writers, we're busy with our own paranoia, thinking that, the beta reader is going to hate it. And we don't realize that they don't want to let us down. The last thing they want is to hurt our feelings or to fail and have us think they suck as beta readers.
And all of that is about the communication and the feedback. And there are good ways and bad ways to deal with the feedback that you get from a beta reader.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting but scary at the same time when you see that email with your feedback. I don't know about you, but I freak out over getting and I hated this. And, I know that's not realistic because people are nice, but still, every time I see it, I get excited and I freak out.
So if you are the type, like SK, who freaks out, then just remember, you need constructive criticism to grow and to get your book truly ready for publishing. Also, you really don't have to accept every piece of advice you get. I didn't know at the time, but I had a beta reader, Jim, for my very first novel, and Jim made some great suggestions. But he also had made a suggestion that I should remove an entire section. He said, I don't think this is necessary. It doesn't really work for the story. You should remove it. But I was kind of married to it. I really liked it. I left it. Now, all of Jim's suggestions were great, but this particular thing he asked me to remove, when I received a Kirkus review, the reviewer pointed to this section as poetic genius. So had I deleted that part, I would have been deleting like the favorite part of this reviewer. So again, take the advice with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Also, dig deeper and don't take feedback at face value, right? Like you're saying, with a grain of salt. It's not just about answering all questions raised by the betas. It's about understanding what's missing from our story elements, if there's anything missing.
Like I said, trust your gut. Your instincts will tell you what needs to be fixed and what's fine as is. So you should just listen to it.
And if you're not sure what a beta reader meant by a particular comment, you can ask. Betas don't mind the back and forth, and they have no problem giving you clarifications.
A very critical point is you should remember there isn't any one book for everyone. There's always going to be some people who don't quite care for your style or your voice. So you may run into beta readers who that's how they feel. So you should take that into consideration before you just go out and burn your manuscript.
Yes, that's something I would do. But also, a good idea is to let the comments sit for a while before integrating any of them into your book. You'll be surprised how some comments will nag at you that you were sure the beta was wrong and then it hits you, that they were right. Mm-hmm. But sometimes all we need is time to set our pride aside.
Yeah, I think the big thing is anything that a person says, well, I'm sorry, I don't understand this. We can get, as writers, we get infuriated with that kind of comment. It's like, what do you mean you don't understand? It's clear. I couldn't have written it better. And by the way, this is the exact kind of thing that lands us the critical comment in the review. And I think the point here is you're better to stew over that and see if they're right, or maybe if you need to change your thinking in a beta read, than you are to wait until that becomes your next 2-star or 3-star review on Amazon.
So before you start any revisions, please save your original version so you can go back if you make big changes, because of a reader's suggestions, and then you realize, hey, it just didn't work.
And if a person has done all this work for you, it's just common courtesy that when you publish the book, if you're going to do an acknowledgement section, you should mention that person, if they're okay with that. Everyone likes to see their name in print, and it's nice to be attached to a book that you've in some way helped at.
Exactly. So, you want to thank your beta readers no matter what, and even if it's negative comments. But also, as an author, if you're the one acting as a beta, you have to forget that you're a writer. And remember that this isn't your work, your voice, or your style. So read the book as if you're a regular reader.
Yeah, your job is not to rewrite anything, which is, again, why I am not a beta reader. If you want your story completely rewritten in my style, you should send it to me, because I'll absolutely do that for you.
Yes, don't rewrite it.
Yeah, it's just not my job. It's not the beta's job to rewrite anything ever. You leave a note with suggestions. You explain why you think those suggestions are legitimate. But as SK always tells me, another author's words are sacred.
Yes. Just answer the questions that the author wants you to focus on.
Oh, and by the way, a beta reader is not an editor unless you're being asked to work in that capacity. So if you have your little red pen of doom and your idea of beta reading is to go over every period and grammatical mistake, as Elsa would say or sing, just let it go.
Yes, go ahead and make notes in the margins and point out typos and whatever else applies. But you're not acting as a copy editor. If you see it, great. If not, concentrate on the content, story structure, and character development, pacing, and on the instructions you received.
And by all means, please respect the writer's deadline and time. If you offer to beta read, then stick to the agreed timelines, or at least give them enough time to find somebody else to actually meet their deadlines. Because also remember, as an author, you may be asking that person or someone else in the future to do the same for you, and you're going to want your stuff back on time.
Yeah, so just don't agree to beta read if you don't have time to do it in a timely way.
So in closing, and in general, no matter what, always be grateful and thank the beta reader for the time and feedback that you've received. No matter how negative it is, or even if you're dismissing most of it, thank them. It's a hard job.
Exactly. So having a beta reader is crucial in your revision and editing process, and I would advise you not to skip a step. As a writer, you might be too close to your story, and I can assure you that you will benefit greatly from a fresh pair of eyes.
And as I said earlier, I can guarantee you conclusively, as the author, you are too close to your story to make most of the important decisions.
Exactly. So we'll leave you with this quote by someone we have no idea who they are,
which we call unknown. No one of us is as smart as all of us.
Thank you for listening to the Writers Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. For more articles, news and advice, visit our website, writersafterdark.net, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The Writers Podcast is a Writers After Dark radio production. Executive producers SK Anthony and Raymond Esposito. Copyright 2017.